Clap your hands and stomp your feet. You're listening to the Clap Your Hands podcast, hosted by Eliot Shorr-Parks and Kyle Newbeck. Here they go.
So last night, it was a beautiful night out in Philly. I'm out on the roof. I'm listening to the Phillies game, as one does when the weather is nice outside. I'm scrolling on my phone on Twitter, and I noticed that James Harden, the biggest name of the offseason, certainly the biggest name of the Sixers offseason, finally did an interview. He sat down with USA Today. I watched the whole thing. I will say this off the jump. Like, as someone, and I'm sure you get these emails too, from brands that are saying, hey, we can offer you James Harden for 10 minutes if you promote such and such. But here's the rules. Like, this guy's not talking about this. I thought it was very clear that James Harden was not going to talk about the Sixers in this interview. The reporter or the host didn't even ask, and I'm guessing that's because she knew she was not allowed to. But he did talk about the Damian Lillard situation in Miami. I thought he had a pretty clear line that was a shot at Daryl Morey in it. And overall, it was just the first time to hear him speak since all this has gone down. I believe the first time since the end of the season in the locker room in Boston. So I have my thoughts from the interview. Kyle, what'd you think of the 10 minutes with James Harden?
Well, so I want to give credit to the interviewer, Mackenzie Salmon, because she essentially got James to address the trade rumors surrounding him without directly asking him about it, which is always the hardest thing, because a lot of times you will ask a question at a presser or in a one-on-one setting, and I guess this is more prominent with executives, coaches, but they'll say, well, I really can't answer that. I can't talk about this. I can't talk about that player, blah, 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 blah. And so working around it and asking a question in that way is always tough. And I appreciate that she got us this answer to talk about. What I made of it is that at least publicly, he's taking a reasonable stance. And, this is sort of, it dovetails with what we know about what's happened between Harden and the Sixers this summer, right? Where the initial reporting was James wanted out. The Sixers are trying to work with him in order to put him somewhere where he wants to be. And it was not they're drawing a line in the sand and fuck this guy and he's got to come back and blah, blah, blah. It's always been framed as they would like for him to come back because they don't want to trade him for, the poo-poo platter or whatever is being offered out there right now. But they are because they know he's a star player and they know the importance of relationships and what have you, trying to humor his request as much as they possibly can. Now, the divide, as far as I can see it right now, is that I think James and James's representation believe that this should have been done and they want it to happen quicker. And that's sort of the crux of the debate is, are the Sixers dragging their feet or are they just waiting until, someone makes the offer that is going to send this over the top? I would tend to believe it's just there are not a lot of attractive packages out there. And so they're not going to trade him just to trade him. Like I mentioned in a thing I wrote this morning about this, all the reports are Terrence Mann has not been made available by the Clippers. And I really like Terrence Mann, but if you're not willing to trade Terrence Mann for James Harden, it's not a fucking conversation. That's just not a serious trade offer. If you're the Clippers and you're saying, hey, we're giving you expiring contracts and we might give you Terrence Mann if you really make us think about it and maybe come down on your pick ask and things like that. That's just not a serious request. So I think as of now, the Sixers have been correct to just kind of wait this out. And I also understand Harden's perspective. From his point of view, whether it's right or wrong in the Sixers' eyes, he thinks that he wanted to be taken care of long term. It didn't look like that was going to happen here. Wants to move on. And he's kind of just waiting to see how this ends up. But I think for the time being, we'll see if he gets uncomfortable, as he said he might on Instagram. But I think at least for right now, he's handling this probably as he should.
So I thought the initial part of the interview, I think it was the first question was maybe what have you learned in this offseason or something along those lines? And he said, I learned the NBA is a business. And it's James, you've been traded multiple times. It's a business. You've been a part of this. You've been in the league this long. I don't think you just learned it's a business. That's something like third-year players say after they get cut or traded. So he knows it's a business. To me, that was a thing of, and I'm obviously like just taking my takeaway from it, is I thought I was friends with Daryl Morey, but apparently it's just a business. That was my read on it. Like I thought me and Daryl had a relationship where he told me one thing and that was what was going to happen. But now something else has happened. Obviously, like there's been tons of reporting on this, that where he was expecting this, the Sixers didn't do it. And so that's the business part of it. So I thought the one line of saying I've learned it's a business was his way of hinting and kind of confirming what people have been saying, that he is mad at Daryl Morey, that this guy that he probably once considered his good friend feels burned by him, and that it's a business. So that line I thought was kind of the main takeaway in a way. His opinion on Damian Lillard and the trade, he was very rational about it. I don't know if I expected him to maybe say, hey, players should play where they want to play. We're the ones that are out on the court. If a player wants to play somewhere, you should do everything to get him there. Like he could have done that, because to your point, and credit to the host, she found a way to get him to talk about trade requests without getting him to talk about his own situation. Now, maybe he's just giving the PR answer. Who knows? But at this point, we've heard from Harden once in this interview. We've heard from Daryl Morey the week before, and neither made it sound like an especially hostile situation. Like Morey confirmed that Harden wanted out, and Harden, kind of did that as well with it's just a business thing. But Harden seemed very like, hey, if you're not getting what you want, then it is what it is. I just wonder, like, that's extremely subjective. Like Harden could sit here and go, hey, they're offering you this package, these picks. Like, I think that's fair. I don't want to be here. This is a good return. And I'm upset about that. I don't think Harden's going to be texting Daryl Morey or his agent and saying, all right, if they include Terrence Mann, then that's good. But if not, I understand. Like,
that clears the bar. Like that's enough
right.
to get it done.
I don't think he's sitting there with all his Bun B Trill burgers, like waiting to see if Terrence Mann can get included to decide if he's going to eat it. So I thought that he came across as very calm and rational about it. He really kind of, I don't want to say defended the owners or the teams, but he said straight up, like, I see both sides of it. So I thought his answer on it outside of that was good. And yeah, I don't know. Like if we would have recorded this before that interview, I was definitely going down a path of just trade this guy. Like to me, him not going to the Joel Embiid wedding thing, I think was like a line too far to cross of not going. So that I felt was extremely messed up. But then this interview, he did seem a little more rational.
I want to save the wedding discussion for a little bit because I wanted to touch on something related to Lillard and all this. Mm-hmm. I actually am curious. Do you think that, so looking at Lillard specifically in the Miami situation, do you think players would look at it as, so I think most people say Hero is probably the big piece that Miami's sending out, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think players look at that and say, oh, Tyler Hero's good, and like if they should trade him, that's a good enough thing for Dame? Or do you think, and this is how Portland views it, how a lot of other people view it, do you think they think of it as, oh, he doesn't really make any sense there with what they have, and like why would that be the trade? Do you think the average NBA player thinks about it beyond, oh, this is a guy who I know is good, versus,
right,
oh, that guy doesn't make any fucking sense on a team with Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson are already like their core guys, essentially?
So I think players do break this down much like we do. I think that they sit there and go, look, I think Tyler, whatever you think of Tyler Hero, he's not a need for them there. Like, but I think in Damian Lillard's instance specifically, I would think that, and we talked about this on the last pod, like backdoor conversations are had, that he probably and his team probably felt there was a deal Miami would offer that they felt was fair. Like whether he does think highly of Tyler Hero, I'd be a little surprised. Tyler Hero feels like someone that everybody clowns. If you look at how ridiculous he looks on the bench in his outfits, like I feel like he probably gets roasted quite a bit in NBA group chats around the league. But I think that to answer your question, yeah, I do think they break this down. Like it wouldn't surprise me if they're using the trade machine and all these things. I mean, think about, how big time players around the league are essentially general managers. Like LeBron impacts what his team does. And I think he's able to break down and say, this is a need for them. This is their cap space. These are the draft picks they have. I think before a player demands a trade, not all of them. For some reason, I don't picture Harden doing this. Lillard, I think I do picture doing it. I think Lillard probably looked at all of it and was like, I think this would make sense for both sides. And that might be where the anger comes from, where he feels like, hey, I really think this is a trade that's good for you guys. You have Scoot Henderson, you're rebuilding, you get a young player in Tyler Hero, you get draft picks, however they acquire him, all those things. I wonder if maybe Harden's sitting there and being like, yeah, the Clippers aren't really offering anything for me, so you can't just give me away.
So one of the reasons I asked is that if you look at any kind of player polling or when players vote on All-Star and like All NBA, they're asked opinions on, I think they generally skew. Honestly, it's more of the Eliot Shorr-Parks school of basketball where they tend to, I don't want to say inflate because they just have a different perspective on the sport than the average person, but they tend to love scorers more than anything else. Like if a guy can create his own shot and score, they love those guys. Like DeMar DeRozan loved, I think, way more by players than by the average, basketball watcher.
And honestly,
Kyrie Irving
not to get a Jokic thing, but I would guess this is why Jokic is not given the respect by players in like all-star drafts and stuff because his game is not predicated on scoring. Yeah.
But you look at like Devin Booker has always been very highly regarded. Kyrie Irving always very highly regarded. And I'm not saying they're not loved by fans, obviously. Right. In Kyrie's case, for all his issues that he has, on and off the court, extremely entertaining player. His shoe sells like crazy, at least before he lost his Nike deal. And so there are just all these indicators that they tend to value maybe somebody like Hero more than, average John Q basketball fan. So I just wonder if Harden or whoever else, if they're looking at that situation and saying, oh, Tyler Hero, he's a guy I know. He's really good. He's a bucket and things like that, rather than they need to figure out what can they turn Tyler Hero into that makes more sense for their team.
So I do think like the high level players do think about it that way. Harden's such a hard person to get a read on. Like he's obviously one of the best players of all time. He's been in the league a long time. He knows how everything works. He knows
super
a ton about
smart
the league,
too.
Players, super smart, all those things. But he almost doesn't give off the perception that is what he is. So I almost don't picture him sitting there and like thinking about this like chess, like saying, all right, I want to get to the Clippers. They need this. I don't picture him doing that. Maybe he does. Also, frankly, his agent has not been super impressive to me from the outside looking in during this whole thing. So it doesn't feel as well thought out. I think even opting in was probably something that was a semi last minute decision in a way. Like that even felt almost rushed to me. I also wonder, do you think players care what they're traded for? Like, do you think it's embarrassing to a player if it's like, you traded this guy for me, or if Harden only gets traded for, let's say, Norman Powell and like a first round pick? I know that contractually doesn't work, but like a package nobody considers is great. Do you think they care about that? Or is he just like, just get me to the Clippers and that's all that matters?
I think it probably depends on the guy, right? Like some guys are probably more concerned with their perception than anything. And it's also dependent on how you perform after that trade. Like if a team trades you for peanuts essentially, and then you justify that trade value by playing like shit at your new home, then what are you going to do? But if we always can go back and say, wow, this team got that guy for nothing, and then they play awesome and they win a title or they win awards, whatever it is, we always remember those. So I think it depends on how they perform. And it's also like some guys are more sensitive than others. And I think ultimately, if you put them on a team they want to be on and they play well there, like no guy is going to think, oh man, you traded me for this. If anything, I think it'd probably be more motivation. It's like, I'm only worth, Norm Powell and Marcus Morris's contract and first round, like whatever it is. I think a guy like Harden, if he has, and he's a prideful guy, I think, whatever his other problems are with the off court stuff, he cares about his craft and cares about his legacy. So, I think he might look at that as an opportunity to say, all right, I only went for that much. It's time for me to remind people like who I am, essentially.
It was an also really funny part of the interview. And again, you could tell she was not allowed to ask. So I credit her of thinking of creative ways to get quotes out of him. But he's talking about like the difference between David Stern and Adam Silver. He's talking about recruiting for the Houston Dynamo, like Messi in Miami. So it was like, I'm sitting here watching this 10-minute interview and I'm like, there's so many things I want him to talk about, like his relationship with Joel, Morey, and all these things. So it was a masterclass from Harden's team. I'll give him credit for this, of getting his face out there without actually having to discuss anything. So I guess my last Harden question for you would be on this topic is, like I said, we've heard from Morey, we've heard from Harden. Has this changed your opinion on anything? Like, has anything they've said made you feel differently about his chances of causing trouble, his chances of being here, not being here? Do you think there were any takeaways from hearing from both Daryl and Harden?
No, I still tend to think they need to trade him. But, and I'm not saying you trade him for whatever you can get for him. I think they've taken the right approach, as I said earlier. And I think this is going to come down to, at some point, the Clippers saying, look, the window that we have with Kawhi and Paul George is not that big. Their contracts are getting close to expiring. They haven't been able to stay healthy as is. Might only have a few runs, if that, with these guys. We need to make the team better by any means necessary. And James Harden, as much as he's had his issues in the playoffs and all that, considerably raises the floor for them in the regular season. And I think end of the day, the Clippers are probably going to pony up. And holy shit. Apparently, Bronny James just suffered cardiac arrest, and that's crazy. Really? Yeah, at USC. Wow. Sorry, that was like a big news story. That like, obviously, prayers up for him. I hope he's okay and that he's in stable. It says he's in stable condition. So
so he is okay. So hopefully, that's good. So now he's okay.
Awesome. Yeah. But that's really scary, man. I saw that. I saw cardiac arrest, and I was like, that. My whole brain just shut down.
Especially someone that young, too.
Yeah. But, well, listen, man.
Well, what a roller coaster there. So he is okay in stable condition as of now, as of this recording. So positive thoughts sent to Bronny James and his family. And
LeBron, that just, not to get on a tangent on this, but there's like a lot of studies that have been done in recent years about how hard these kids go and like AAU and things like that, and how it impacts. Normally it's spoken of with injuries, like all the knee injuries and lower body stress stuff that happens to these guys. Cause I don't think people realize how horrible basketball is on your body. I know people think of football as like, it's like the violent collision sport, and it has a lot of other risks associated with brain trauma and things like that. But with basketball, you're like, the human body, you should not be running up and down on hardwood over and over and over and over
82
again.
nights a year plus practice, all those things.
And it's just so I hope the Bronny's okay. I hope this is just like some kind of weird blip. Maybe it's like a heat stroke sort of deal, because this is, preseason type stuff. It could have just been, I hope it's more something like that, where maybe he is dehydrated.
I mean, it must have been terrifying for people at
USC. I can only imagine. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever, when playing sports, been on a team where you had a teammate like go down and it was immediately clear that it was. So I played soccer with a guy who he took it was our goalie, comes out for a ball, takes a cleat to the face and like broke his face and was knocked out cold, and they had to like medevac him out. And it was like, I always think of that in moments where guys suffer either serious injuries or like when the DeMar Hamlin thing happens, like things like I'm just always amazed that guys even can collect themselves and try to play, let alone play well. It's such a scary thing to see.
I do think a unique part of our job, and there are a lot of fans out there who are able to say like, yes, these are real humans. These aren't just action figures we see every Sunday or every 3 times a week in the NBA. But it really is an interesting part of our job, seeing behind the scenes, like seeing NFL players throughout the week, their health, those type of things, like how much their body hurts, even though you just see on an injury report okay, he's got like a hamstring injury. He was day to day. Like you see those words, you're like, oh, that's not that bad. But like guys like Jordan Mailata dealt with a shoulder injury all year last year, and we don't talk about it. So to take this one step further, that we can get back on track. This is why, for the most part, the Kylian Mbappe thing aside, but like I think that this is why I'm always like athletes should take the most money they can right away. This is like why I'm this is like the crux of it. This is why it's important for athletes to get paid, because they're the ones that have physical limitations to their career. They're the ones that are risking their health. And yeah, so definitely thinking about Bronny. It's an interesting juxtaposition to now go to James, who's talking about holding out over 36 million. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, I guess so to bring it all the way back, you basically don't feel much has changed from the James Harden and Daryl Morey. Things.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. That wasn't trying to turn this into like the player health podcast or anything, but just one of those things that once you see that flash across the timeline, it's hard to.
It definitely catches your attention. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button right here. You'll get all the videos in a playlist, and make sure you leave a comment in the section below to let us know what you think.
And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date. All our latest updates, new episodes, new podcasts. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.